Welcome, everyone, to the long-awaited session. Very, very excited about today's session. Several years ago, when I made a career transition to get into human resources, I started doing research, just trying to figure out, like, where can I get the best talent information? Where can I get the best insights? Where can I find not just any data, but data good enough for me to walk into an executive room and be influential? And it was frustrating until I found Josh Berson's work. I think several of us, once we find Josh Berson's work and we understand the insights, we feel that we are well-armed and well-prepared to have any talent conversation and to be able to influence talent outcomes within our organization. And so what we're about to hear today is just more of that really rich and good data. So super excited for today's session. I'm thrilled that we have Kathy Enderes and Josh Berson here today to help provide insights in the upcoming Systemic HR, a New Operating Model report that will be launching in December. So this is fresh off the press. We are the first to receive this information, so please take a lot of notes, and afterwards there will be an opportunity to meet with both Josh and Kathy, so be prepared to ask any follow-up questions. So as I mentioned, most of us are already familiar with Josh and Kathy's work, but I have to give Josh his due by sharing a little bit of his bio. Josh Berson is an industry analyst focusing on the global talent market trends and technologies impacting workforces across all industries and segments. As we all know, his research is featured in publications such as Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Wall Street Journal, and many, many, many more. He recently published his book, Irresistible, in 2022. The Josh Berson Company provides a wide range of research and services for HR leaders and teams, as well as the Josh Berson Academy, which today has approximately 50,000 members and offers cohort-based programs for HR professionals. Kathy Enderes is a Senior Vice President and Global Industry Analyst at the Josh Berson Company, supporting clients and the market with evidence-based insights on all areas of HR, learning, talent, and HR technology. Kathy has more than 20 years global experience from management consulting with IBM, PwC, and EY. And there are many other letters of the alphabet that we have to make sure that we get in there for you, Kathy. As a talent leader at McKesson and Kaiser Permanente, she also led as a leader at McKesson and Kaiser Permanente, and most recently, Kathy led talent and workforce research at Deloitte. Her passion is to make the world a better place, work a better place, and more meaningful. Please join me with a warm welcome for Josh and Kathy to the Talent Connect stage.
Thank you, Twila. You're going to meet Kathy in a minute. So you're the first ones to hear about something we've been working on for at least 2 years, maybe 15 years, which is what can we do, what is going to optimize the HR organization? Not the HR practice of this, and this, which we've been studying forever and ever, but this whole thing that we call the HR function. And as we were thinking about it and trying to figure out what it is and what to call it and what to position it, we eventually realized we're going to call it systemic HR. And you'll understand why we came up with that name as we get through this. But the idea is that this is not a bunch of individual domains and individual centers of excellence and individual professionals doing individual things. This is a system. This is a function that should be operating as an integrated system across the company to make the company more successful, to make the employees happier and more successful, and obviously make the financial returns better. So that's a little bit of an intro. The way we do this research, we're doing it in partnership with LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's helped us a lot, is we talk to a lot of you. You guys know us. I'm sure a lot of you know me. You probably know Kathy and others. We hear about your problems. You ask us questions. We did a massive survey. We've analyzed a lot of the data from the survey. We've interviewed a lot of you. And then we sit down and we try to figure out what is this all about. And that's what you're going to hear about today. But the reason we're doing it is because we have to. And it has to do with the problems that companies face. And so let me spend a couple of minutes on that first. Then I'll go through the initial findings. Then I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and she's going to dive into some of the details. And just to give you a preview, you don't have to take a photo of every slide. There's going to be a lot of information. We're happy if you'd like to do that, but we'll be rolling out much more details on this over the rest of this year and then into next year, because there's a lot of information that's going to be interesting to you. So, this is a strange sort of economy we're living in. If you look at the stock market, short the little blip from the pandemic, we've actually been on one of the longest economic growth cycles that I can remember. Really, the last true recession was in 2008, which is now 15 years ago, almost 16 years ago. I don't think you're going to find another period of time in the American history when we went that long without a recession. And during that period of time, a lot of things happened. We had digital transformation of many, many types, more to come. But amongst many of the things that happened in the digitization of our businesses is we started to redefine what industries we're in. And one of the things that we find when we talk to a lot of you is the reason you're interested in skills, the reason you're interested in upgrading your hiring and career mobility and career development is because the company that you're in is trying to do something that it never did before. And the reason it's trying to do that is that these industries are colliding with each other. The retail industry, for example, is getting into healthcare. I think I mentioned this earlier in the session I was doing a little while ago. The healthcare industry is the largest employer in the United States, and it's expected to be 50% of all the new jobs over the next 10 years. So it's going to be even bigger because we're all getting older and we need more healthcare to kind of maintain our wonderful lives. So retail is getting into that. But if you're a consumer packaged goods company and you make food or items that consumers buy, and you used to go through the retailers are building white box label products, and so now you have to go directly to consumers. So the CPG industry is becoming a direct-to-consumer industry. The energy industry is obviously getting into solar and electric and batteries and mining. The car industry is getting into software. I could go on and on and on and on. It doesn't matter what company you work for. There's something going on in your company that's forcing you to learn how to hire, train, manage, pay, and take care of people that you've probably never done before. And that's been part of this evolution. And of course, at the same time that's going on, the CEOs are looking at the financial markets, which, by the way, haven't done super well this year because we're at the end of this economic cycle. And they're saying, we need more productivity. We came out of the pandemic. I want you guys back in the office. I'm tired of you working from home because I know you're better, more productive at work in the office, right? Because I know better than you do, which is basically what they've been saying, right? The Microsoft research says that 87% of employees think they're highly productive. Only 17% of executives think they're highly productive. And so they're bringing in more pressure. And just this last year, PwC interviewed 2,000 CEOs. And they said, you know what, yes, productivity is important, yes, execution is important, but actually the most important thing for us is the transformation of our company into this new thing that we're trying to become, whatever that may be. In fact, more than half of them said, I would like to be spending more time on transformation and less time on execution. And by the way, we're going to release a piece of research later this year on leadership, which shows that actually that has affected leadership development and leadership models and all sorts of things related to leadership. Well, and then of course on the employee side, quiet quitting, burnout, turnover, retention issues. I've never seen so much data on the stress and the angst, in a sense, that employees have. Just this morning, Kathy and I were reading, Kaiser Permanente had the largest strike launch day that they've ever had. Kathy can talk about that when she stands up here. Employee, the UAW strike and so forth. So this is a very complex time to be in HR. It's not a business as usual time. And I don't think this is going to get any better. There's some things that are going to change. In fact, what's going to change the most, and this is some research that you're going to see, us next week when we launch this report we're doing at the tech conference, is in the middle of all of that, we haven't been having as many children. People are getting married later, or they're not getting married at all. And so the size of the workforce, the number of working people in virtually every developed economy is either peaking or going to peak in the next decade. So over the next 20 or 30 years, you're not going to be able to find as many human beings to do the work you want to do. This is what's been going on in Japan. This is what's been going on in China. It's now hitting Northern Europe. It's going to hit other developed economies. In the United States, of course, we have a lot of integration, so we have other sort of factors that weigh in. But we're going to have the same problem. So you know, HR as a function needs to be defined in a different way. And so one of the things that drove us to do this research is looking at these issues that you guys tell us about all the time. And we're very, very familiar with these because, you know, Kathy and me and the other people in our company, when we talk to HR leaders, we hear the same thing over and over again. It doesn't matter sort of which company it is or how big or small or whether they're growing or shrinking. We tend to hear the same issues. All of these things tend to come up over and over and over again. And the thing that's interesting about these problems is none of them fit into one of the traditional domains of HR. Every one of these problems are cross-disciplinary problems. Let's just suppose you do have a retention problem or you do have a problem hiring. Is it pay? Is it diversity? Is it management skills? Is it training? Is it development? Is it career? It's all of that. So we can't operate HR as siloed groups, each optimizing our own little thing, if we're going to deal with these problems. So we didn't just dream up this project because we thought it was kind of fun to define the new role of HR. We lived this and we've been watching this go on and we've been trying to observe what can we do and what can organizations do to adapt. Now, part of, you know, the story here, before I get into the research, is where organizations are going. Now, the reason HR is in somewhat of a state that it is because of the history of organizations. So let me take 2 minutes and walk you through the slide. You're going to see this big white paper come out next week on this. You know, in the 15, 16, 1700s, the way organizations operated and made money was they were mostly really groups of people. And if you were a farm and you wanted to grow your farm, you hired more farmers. So the more people we hired, the more money we made. And so hiring was the way to grow. And then we had the industrial age and we built machines and factories and all sorts of manufacturing efficiencies. We said, well, yeah, we need more people, but we need labor. We need management and labor. So let's divide the workforce into two parts, management and labor. And the labor is sort of replaceable. We'll train them enough to do their job. And the more we automate, the more money we'll make, and we'll grow the company through scale. And that basically, by the way, is where a lot of the HR practices we have today were invented. They were invented in the industrial age. I entered the sort of HR domain in the early 2000s, and every company I talked to at that point in time asked me exactly the same question. How does GE do this? Because we want to copy them. You guys are all a little bit younger than me, but you probably remember that. Everybody wanted to go to Crotonville, and they wanted to talk about what Jack Welch had said, and on and on and on. And they were modeling the HR function after whatever it was those brilliant guys did at GE. And then all of a sudden we had the internet, and then we had computers, and then we had mobile phones, and all these barriers between organizations and across organizations came down. People started moving between companies. LinkedIn was formed. And all of a sudden, you know, if you were a manufacturer and you had this, you know, really nice company and everybody worked there their whole career, all your good ideas were going to somebody else. And now we had to compete based on time to market, innovation, creativity. And we realized we don't need our employees to be labor. We need them to be creators and inventors and problem solvers. And so now we need a talent model where we need, you know, more skilled people and highly skilled people, and even maybe we'll let people make decisions at the front line. Maybe we won't wait for managers to tell them what to do. So we had to hire differently, we had to pay differently, we had to think about, you know, sort of the whole talent experience differently. And now we're moving into a fourth era, which is the one that I think we're going to be living in for the next couple of decades, which is we can't hire that many people. There aren't that many to hire. So we got to figure out the tools and technologies to make every single person in this company even more successful than they were before. And this is what the data of the economy shows, is that if you look at the GDP per worker, it has gone, it was flat during the agrarian age, It started to go up during the industrial age, and now it's skyrocketing. Because if you use AI or you use technology, and you guys all know this because you're going through this in HR, you can do more and more and more work if the organization is designed appropriately to allow you to take advantage of the science and the technology and the AI and so forth that you have. And so what we're moving to is an age that I like to think of as the super worker, where every worker is going to have vast amounts of information and tools and other automation available to them. And you guys are going to get this right in your desktop from the Copilot, from the new tools from LinkedIn, from the recruiter tools and so forth. Salespeople are going to get it, marketing people are going to get it, manufacturing people and so forth. So we've really got, a lot of things to deal with in HR. Now, ultimately, the way this, plays out is the way organizations are going to succeed with all of these changes is through what we call organizational ingenuity. And organizational ingenuity is exactly what you guys are doing today. You are inventing new ideas, new ways of working, new models, new programs to adapt to this change. However, the HR function didn't start like this. The HR function started as a bunch of personnel stuff. And so we've got payroll and clerks to take care of the back office and compliance officers in the early 1900s. And then we said we need people to manage the factories. So let's use labor relations. Let's create training departments so we can train all these workers when they come and go because we've got all this labor to manage. And then we said, well, wait, maybe there's IO psychology. Maybe we should do, a little bit of analysis. Maybe we should survey people. Maybe we should do an annual survey. Maybe we should do a quarterly survey. Maybe we should figure out whether people are happy. Maybe happiness has something to do with how successful our companies are. So let's create a bunch of jobs for that. And then we said, well, we've got a bunch of data. Let's use the data. Let's create a group of people that look at the data about people, and let's create a bunch of jobs there. And so we created this new world of sort of smarter and smarter systems and smarter. And then we said, well, that's all great, but we really need to think about the journey of an employee. And so let's create employee experience. And, and you see where I'm going here? Is this profession that you guys are a part of is like a tree that keeps sprouting branches, right? There's a new branch here and a new branch there, and oh, let's come up with a job in, prompt engineering for HR or whatever it is. There'll be a new, I'm sure LinkedIn knows about whatever the new job titles are. So this profession that we're all part of, which is a big profession and it's a really important one, has grown over time to be this kind of complicated, tree of jobs. And we just went through all this data with LinkedIn. And we're going to show you what these jobs are in a few minutes. And while that's going on, and all these people are in these specialized groups, in COEs, oftentimes isolated from each other, by the way, that's the problem with HR, the problems are all systemic. These are the things that I know you guys are working on. These are the things that we hear from companies about all the time that cross all of those boundaries. These are programs that most of which couldn't possibly be developed by one domain of HR. So that's the idea of systemic HR, is how do we take this tree with lots of jobs, lots of roles, lots of skills, and stitch it all together so that it can operate as a problem-solving organization, not just an organization that provides great service to the employees. And Kathy's going to walk you through the maturity model, and you understand what I mean. Now, visually, I keep trying to think about how I was going to visualize this because, one of the things I like to do is I'm kind of a visual thinker. So if we started with this, with all the branches out doing their thing, what we really want to do is we want to fill in the tree. We really want to turn HR into this living, breathing, organic entity that thrives and grows. And if you've ever read the book, The Life of Trees, you should read this book, by the way. It's an absolutely unbelievable book. Trees are like living, breathing, communicating animals. And that's the idea here, is what we really want to happen in HR is we want to have all of the specialized roles cross-trained, as using the T-shaped kind of career model, working together on projects and initiatives and solutions to help the company adapt and change through everything that I talked about earlier. That's what we're trying to figure out how to do, and that's what this research is all about. Okay, so that's a little bit of the background as to where we're coming from. And I think we've figured this out, by the way. I'm pretty sure that what you're going to see in the next part of this presentation is going to ring a bell, and you're going to say, aha, I kind of see where we need to go. Now, before I get into that, let me talk about the research. So what Kathy and I and the other analysts do, and I want to give Kathy credit because Kathy's done the bulk of the work here with another analyst we have in Europe, is we sit around and we hypothesize about this. And we literally, like a scientist, we literally say, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And then we go out and we do surveys and we study it. And so we did a very large survey. A lot of you may have participated in it. We've interviewed dozens and dozens of CHROs. We look back at all of our other research. Kathy's going to show you the relationship between this research and all of the other research we've done over the last 10 or 15 years. And we've covered almost every industry and almost every geography. So there is a lot of data behind this. And you're going to see a little bit of it, but what we're going to try to do mostly today is give you the high-level ideas so you can take it home and think about it. First of all, this profession, I want to just take 1 minute and sort of honor all of you guys in the profession. By the way, I am not an HR person. Most of you don't know this. I've never done HR. I'm more of an analyst and a researcher, but I certainly know a lot about it. This is a profession of probably 30 to 40 million people. Hundreds and hundreds of job titles, primarily female, but not in all domains. Some domains are much more diverse. Very highly educated. The education level of HR people is extremely high. It was actually astounding to me how high the numbers are. And generally, so most of the people in this profession are highly educated, very passionate, people-oriented professionals trying to add value in their companies. So we're dealing with, we don't have problems with talent, by the way, in HR. We have problems of skills, but we don't have a lack of passionate people. In fact, I think we have sometimes more passion than we have skills in HR, to be honest. And here's how complicated it is. So when I left Deloitte and I was first starting our academy, companies kept asking me, where's your competency model? I know Dave Ulrich, and I've read all the books on competency models, and I thought, we don't need a competency model. We need a capability model. What are the capabilities that HR people need to do these jobs well? And we came up with 92. There's 92 capabilities on this, and there's about 10 more we want to add when we get around to it. So this is a very, very complex domain, because we're talking about technology, psychology, organizational development and design, learning, training, all of the aspects of assessment. I mean, this is a very complex profession. So here we are in this, sitting in these jobs, dealing with some of the biggest problems our companies face, with the biggest skills shortage being ourselves. And when I started our academy, I was surprised. There were no really big HR academies out there. They just didn't exist. I don't know why that is, because we're trying to, fix that problem. But we have to take care of the fact that most HR transformations have to be done from the inside out. We can't just reorganize the HR department and assume everything's going to change if we're not reskilling and continuously developing and training ourselves in the HR function. So you'll see this as part of the systemic model, is that all the pieces have to fit together, but all of us has to kind of know a bit more about what the other parts of HR do in order for us to add enough value in this much more problem-oriented, problem-solving domain. And here's just an example of the data that came back from the survey. I'll let Kathy walk through this more, but when we were walking through this data the last couple of months, I kept noticing this number seems so low. Why is this number so low? Why is this number so low? Did we analyze this correctly? There's a lot of capabilities missing. Now, the reason this is missing is not because people aren't smart. It's not because people aren't working hard. It's not because we don't have great ideas. It's because we're living in an old operating model. The history of HR was we're the personnel department, we're the compliance department, we're the service delivery department, we're the center of excellence department. You tell us what you want, we'll do it for you. You have a problem? Well, we'll call the right specialists and send them over to talk to you. We never built an HR function over the years that could adapt and consult and learn and leverage technology the way we have to today. So as you'll see, and we actually have a couple of clients here in the room who are actually sort of living this world, and you know, we'll introduce you to them a little bit later, is that these are symptoms of a profession that is about to change, and it is changing. And that's really what this research is all about. So one thing we did, and I'll let Kathy talk about this in a minute, is when we go through these surveys, we ask companies about, I don't know, there's 89, 100 questions in these surveys, and we ask companies to rate themselves in different areas, and then we group the questions into categories. And there's essentially 6 functional areas we studied. We studied the strategy part of HR, the operating model. Operating model means how do we actually do things, who does it, and how do they work together. How dynamic is the HR function, how much mobility and so forth inside the function is there, how consultative can we be, how quickly can we adapt to a particular problem when it's new and it comes up in a new part of the company, in a region, how flexible is the structure, and what is our technology stack. And you can see in the dark blue, the things that matter really have to do with cross-domain expertise, skills, strategy and alignment with the organization, thinking about the employee experience at the beginning of everything that we do. Some of the things that you guys know about, but under the covers, we have to build a much more adaptable organization to do this. And here's sort of the high-level findings, and then I'm going to turn over to Kathy in a minute. So of the many things that we looked at, the way we do this research is we statistically cluster all of these questions against each other. And we try to figure out where the relationships are related, and then we build a maturity model that Kathy's going to show you in a minute. And as a part of doing that, we look at all of these practices and we figure out which ones seem to be driving the highest correlation to 3 things: financial performance, human capital performance, and innovation. And this is the top 15 things. The first category has to do with your ability to align with what the business is trying to do at a very senior level. That's not just the CHRO having a seat at the table. That's the HR function being able to literally deliver on the big strategic initiatives that the company cares about. And I don't just mean skills. Skills is our problem. The CEO's problem is we need to get into this new industry and we need to build market share. Skills are the way we might do that, but that's not the C-level problem. The second level is the operating model. How quickly can we adapt? Do we understand the problem that we just heard about? Can we bring people together in HR and solve the problem quickly? Or is the COE sitting around, you know, says, well, we'll get to that next year because we're too busy implementing Workday this year and we'll do that later. Etc. So that's the second area. The third level is the solution design. How do we develop things? How do we iterate on things? Do we have a product manager or a solution manager to monitor the performance of one of these HR programs we built? Do we get good data back from our employees, and do we iterate on it? Are we working with the technology group in doing that? Then there's the issue of our own professional development. How are we training HR business partners? Are we rotating people around inside the HR function? Do we bring people from outside of HR into HR? By the way, most HR departments don't rotate into and out of HR. It's very rare. But actually, that's a very big best practice, is to professionalize HR so much that it's a career path for people who aren't in HR to come into HR and figure out how complicated our lives are, and for us to go see how complicated their lives are. And then, of course, tech. And what we found in tech is where we are today is if you're not good at tech, you're not good at HR. Tech is not a nice to have. Tech is instrumental and critical to your success. So this is just a little bit of the high level findings. And ultimately, the big, sort of story here, as I show you, turn it over to Kathy and talk to you about the maturity model, is that the big transition that has to take place is exactly going back to those 4 evolutions of the economy, is we have to redefine the HR function as not a service delivery function, not a compliance function, not an operations function, but a problem-solving organization. It needs to look much more like a professional services organization and much less like the 1980s IT department. And unfortunately, when I look at the operating model of HR, and I'm not trying to beat down on IT, a lot of you have designed HR departments that look like a 1980s IT department. Call us when you have a problem. We'll take a ticket for you, and we'll send somebody out there, and we'll fix it. That is not what companies need. Okay. And one more thing, and I'll turn it over to Kathy. So we have a lot of sort of visuals and stories. When you look at this, because it's such a big sort of complicated topic, it affects a lot of things. It affects your strategy. It affects your technology. It affects what your business partners do. It affects the COEs. Do we need COEs? Maybe not. Maybe we have combined COEs. Maybe we have networks of excellence, not centers of excellence. Do we measure ourselves by time to service? Do we measure ourselves by cost of hire? Or do we measure ourselves through a business measure that might have to do with the performance and success and growth of the business, right? I mean, we could go through this line by line, and you'll see that as you start redefining what you do, many of the things change. And if you look at what a sort of evolved HR organization looks like, you can see that it just operates differently. And we talk to a lot of companies, and many times the company knows that there's a problem. We have an old technology, or we're not organized well, or we're too inefficient, or we have too many people doing this and not enough people doing that. And then we talk to somebody else, and they look different. And this is just a sense of what this is about. And I think this one in the middle, HR is a place to learn, is a big part of this. In the 20 years or so that I've been an analyst, every year I see an accelerating set of new topics hitting you guys that weren't there the year before. And so if your sort of function or profession, but your team isn't able to quickly adapt and learn something new, and by the way, AI is a perfect example of that, then you do tend to fall behind. Okay, so that's sort of the high-level intro to this. Let me turn it over to Kathy now, and Kathy's going to take you through the maturity model and give you some more specifics. I told you guys this is going to be a lot of material, so stay tuned. All right, Kathy, turning over to you. Oh, one more thing. I just want to point this chart out to you. Come on here. So here's another piece of evidence. We looked at the growth rate. So we have a capability model. We have an academy. We have an assessment. You guys, hopefully you'll all join. And we looked at the companies that the highly skilled HR people work for. Those companies are the fastest growing companies. And that's what this chart shows, is the companies that are growing at 15% per more per year have a significantly higher number and higher level of capabilities in HR. And I don't know if that's a cause or an effect, but there's a direct relationship there. So this stuff really is bottom line, not just good for us, it's good for the business. Okay, Kathy, over to you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Well, this was fantastic, of course, so it's always a tough act to follow Josh, but I'll keep going on a lot of different things about our maturity model. So first, I want to talk about where we are today. So this is based on the survey that we did. As Josh said, there were over 1,000 companies that participated in a survey. We had about 3,000 verbal comments, too. So for everybody who has given their thoughts and their input, thank you. This is what came out. What is HR really good at? We're really good at being a collaborative HR leadership team. You see the highest rated items here in the blue side, where it says the HR leadership works really well together. We know each other really well. The CHRO works well with the CEO as well, which is all great. CHRO has a good role, a strategic role. So HR leadership being at a good level, seat at the table if you want. But are we really utilizing the seat at the table as much as we could have? And on the right-hand side, you see the lowest scoring items of all the 105 practices that we studied, 105 of them. Lowest scoring item, and Josh talked about it too, is 3%. Only 3% of organizations actually rotate people in and out of HR. 3%. So basically bringing people from HR into other areas of the company and then back again. When we interviewed the head of HR for a very large tech company that's global, he is the head of HR in Europe, he said to me, I was running the business actually as the president in Europe, and I was always complaining about HR, so they made me be the head of HR so I can fix it, right? And that's a great strategy because then he really had to understand and learn about it. But hardly anybody's doing that. Like having the HR role actually as a leadership role that a president came into, the CHRO role, is a very forward-thinking approach of the CEO as well. And I obviously spent some time, as you heard from Twila, as an HR leader, but I've also worked in consulting before. So I came from consulting, then I came into HR, and I'm now more into a consulting and research area again. I think the point being is if you rotate people in and out of HR, they understand your business better, and they can bring all of these practices into the HR function and just think about it in a different way and understand the business better. Only 4% of organizations have a fully defined AI and HR strategy. And I know I was just talking with Josh yesterday, when we go into this conference season, if you get $1 for every time we hear AI in HR, we're going to be rich, right? But only 4% of companies have a defined AI and HR strategy. So the point here is we're on the right track, but we're not quite getting there. So let me talk about our maturity model. And the way this maturity model works, we always do these 4-level maturity models. Actually, the first time I met Josh, I asked him, why do we have 4 levels? Why not 3 or 5? And Josh said, well, 3 was not enough and 5 was too many. But the point here is really the level 4 is the highest level of maturity. This is what hardly any company is doing, but it's something to aspire to. Those are also the level 4 companies are the companies that have the best business outcomes. They're financially growing. They delight their customers. They have great engagement, retention of their employees. They innovate better. They have more productivity, all of the great stuff that you want as an organization. Level 1 companies, less so, right? Level 1 companies, less so. So let me walk you through that maturity model. Level 1 companies are those companies that focus on transactional compliance. We call this transactional compliance because this is kind of the HR police, right? That's the HR police, keeps you out of trouble, defends the organization for legal risk, makes sure that nobody breaks the law. We don't want to get sued. We don't want to have any employment lawsuits, any of that. Basically, it's not very forward-looking, obviously. HR operates as a cost center. So what it means there is, of course, when you're the CEO and you have a cost center, you want to minimize cost at all costs, right? You're going to try to cut HR costs all the time. How this works from an operating model is usually a lot of duplication and fragmentation. You might have the VP of HR for one business unit, and we'll talk more about that, and they have maybe all the functional domains reporting to them. And then we have another duplication in another business unit, maybe another geography. Then we might have some shared services or not. And at some point, when you have a cost that's operating like that, you're going to look at this as the CEO and the CFO and say, there's too much being spent, too much duplication. We have all these HR systems, all these HR capabilities across the globe. Maybe we should do an HR transformation. When I was in consulting at the beginning of my career, I worked actually on all of these HR transformations. And we called them transformations, but really what they were about was more technology enablement of the HR function to take cost out. And we had the service delivery model, right, the 80s IT department, as Josh calls it, where we said, okay, maybe we should do some shared services. Maybe we should do some combined things where we do all the technology stuff together in the same system. Maybe we have the tier 0, that's basically employee self-service, and tier 1, when you have a problem, you go to the employee call center, or the service center. And if there's more problems, or the problem is more complicated, you go to tier 3, which is the COEs. So we stood up all these COEs. And then we said there's also the HR business partners that are going to be embedded in the business. And if you look on the side, actually here you have what percentage of companies are at each stages. Level 1, 39% of companies are at level 1. So that's a lot of companies that are at level 1. And it's not just small companies, by the way. You might think this is only the smallest companies, and as they grow, they go into level 2. Not true. So we have a very even distribution of companies of all sizes. Industries is a big differentiator. I'll talk about that in a little bit, where you're at the maturity model. But level 2 companies are those that focus on efficiency, service delivery, answering the phones, solving the problems, like the ticketing problems that people have, reducing cost, reducing duplication, good quality, but better cost efficiency, basically. Not so much about the strategic forward-looking thing. This is your typical service delivery model that probably many of you have, right? So 29% of companies are at that stage. And by the way, the stage is built up. So you can't say, well, we are done with legal compliance. Of course, you're still going to do legal compliance as you move up the chain, right? So when you're in level 2 company, when you're at the efficient service delivery model kind of stage, of course, as you want to move up the chain, you don't say, well, we don't do good quality service, we don't do service delivery anymore, we don't answer the phones anymore when people have a question. Of course, you're still going to do that, but there's something fundamentally different as you go to level 3 companies. We call that solution-centric, and you might read through solution-centric and problem-centered, and it might sound the same, right? What's the difference between solution-centric and problem-centered? It's actually not exactly not the same at all. So let me give you an example of what solution-centric means and what problem-centered means. Solution-centric is the United States Postal Service. They are very, very efficient about delivering mail, right? But did they invent email? Did they invent Slack? Did they invent Teams? Of course not, right? They are optimizing the solution that they have, which is delivering physical mail. So that's an example of a solution-centric company that's super efficient about what they do, like optimizing their solution. Problem-centric is Netflix. Netflix is a problem-centric company because they started with the DVDs. And are they in the DVD business anymore? Not at all, right? They didn't just optimize the DVD distribution business. They are now in the streaming business because their problem that they're having is not distributing DVDs at all. It's creating entertainment for people, right? Getting entertainment to people the way that they want it. So that's the difference between the solution-centric companies that usually from an HR operating perspective, they have product managers, they create really great products, they kind of add a product management layer, a solution center layer over the regular Ulrich kind of service delivery model. The problem-centered organizations, and only 11% of companies are that, the problem-oriented level 4 companies, they think about every problem in a fundamentally different way. So that when they get a problem, they reorganize teams quickly around that. They have problem-centered teams that come together from different functions, from different areas. The recruiting COE or the recruiting people might come together with the learning people, with the mobility people, with the DEI people, employee experience people, to really figure out how to solve that problem, how to for example, fill a skills gap or a talent gap that you have in one area, a turnover problem that you might have in another area. It's never just one COE. It's never just one area that has to work on that. So level 4 companies, they really operate more like a consulting company. They operate, and I used to be in consulting, so I know how they work. They have actually very, very simple organizational structures, very, very simple job models, very simple. They have 6 levels of consultants, and then they have the partner. That's usually how all of them work. So they don't have all these different hierarchies, all these different job models. They have specialization. But people, when I started actually working in an organization, somebody told me, this is going to be your manager. And I said, well, I don't really care, because in consulting, there's not even the concept of a manager at all. In consulting, you have the project manager that leads the project. And with them, you work for the period of time that you have a project. And then you move on and you go to a different project. But of course, in most organizations, that's not the case at all. And that's also not how most HR organizations work. So this is kind of the maturity model. And we've spoken with so many companies. Every company is on a different stage. And as you think through that, you can probably guess where your company is at. It's probably a hodgepodge. It's probably a mix of all of this, right? So you probably think, as I describe all of these different maturity levels, you might say, oh, in some areas we seem to be in level 2, but maybe we're already going into level 3, and maybe we're already going into level 4, but sometimes we are in level 4, and maybe we go back to level 1, as I just had a conversation with the CHRO of TomTom, actually, who is one of our level 4 organizations that we have portrayed in this study. So this is our maturity model. And so how are we doing on evolving to this maturity model? Well, let me talk a little bit about how progress is going. I say here the progress is slow and uneven. And the reason why I say it's slow, well, first the good news. Maybe first the good news. When we worked with LinkedIn, and actually this is based on, it's going to blow your mind, the numbers that this is based on from LinkedIn. It's based on 7.5 million HR people and their profiles and their roles and their skills on LinkedIn. And we asked the team at LinkedIn, which was fascinating, to go back 5 years and then compare that to today. How many skills were in the HR profession and how many roles, different roles, did they identify in the HR profession? In 2017, 300 skills, 200 roles. That's a lot already, right? Pretty complex, pretty big. 2022, 400 skills, 250 different roles. So what that means is the function is getting more complex, but then also more strategic in the way that when we looked at what the new skills are, what these 50 new skills are that came aboard, a lot of leadership skills that we have highlighted here, but then also a lot of kind of new disciplines, more strategic disciplines, DEI, for example, total rewards, employee experience, talent development, talent mobility, those kind of new things that don't fit into one of the more traditional kind of buckets of HR, those are evolving. So that's really great. So why am I saying that progress is slow and uneven? Well, the bad news is when you look at all of the roles that are trending up, like the roles that are rising fastest and the roles that are declining fastest. On the left-hand side, you see the roles that are rising fastest. And a lot of these roles are actually very administrative in nature. You have like payroll accountants, you have administrative assistants, those kind of roles rising really quickly. While on the right-hand side, you see that the HR business partners and strategic advisor roles and recruiter roles as well are falling the quickest. So what that tells us is as the economy, maybe as the economic growth might be slowing down, organizations focus more on administration and less on the strategic value. So that's kind of a little bit of a problem if we're saying the only way that HR can take the business forward is when we are the strategic consulting business partner to the CEO and to every kind of C-suite leader and every leader in the organization. Industries are also very widely distributed. I told you about, from an organizational size, we see pretty even distribution of maturity across the board, from the smallest organizations all the way to the largest organizations. The same actually holds true for the different geographies. Not a lot of differentiation between the different geographies, but you see wide variation between the different industries. On the left-hand side, you have the industries that are least advanced, and on the right-hand side, you have the industries that are most advanced. And when you look at the industries that are most advanced, you see industries like professional services, consumer products, for example. Even healthcare is pretty far up the chain, and the reason for that is those are the people-centric businesses that really know you can't really survive in business if you don't have good people and if you don't focus on your people. On the other side of the fence is more like government. Even retail is way down the fence because they haven't made the switch for the most part to think about our people are really the biggest differentiator. I know everybody puts it on their website and says people are our greatest assets, but are they really operating the HR function in that way? And the answer is not so much. So that's what we say it's both slow, a little bit one step forward and 2 steps backward, and pretty unevenly distributed. Who is doing this well? So if your name is not up there, it doesn't mean you're not doing this well. These are just the companies that we talked with that we feel are doing some great things. We have LinkedIn on here as well because I know you're doing some great things too of, for example, combining the talent acquisition COE with the learning and development COE to really help people work in problem-centered teams, not in their functional silos as well. The other part that I want you to mention as you look at all these different names up there, it's every geography, it's every industry really that you can be good at. We have a couple of healthcare companies. We have the Lego Group, which is a great example actually of how they are transforming the HR organization as well. MasterCard, for example, is also doing some really innovative things. Unilever. So the point here being lots of different examples of excellence. Has anybody totally figured it out? Probably not, right? Everybody's on a journey. Everybody is maybe going a step forward and a couple of steps backward as well. Okay, so that's the first one. The first insight was progress is going, but it's not that fast as we might have it to be. Well, let's talk about how you get there. Let's talk about the first point of how you get there. First point is how you measure the success of the HR functions really drives your HR strategy and really drives what you focus on. And we see a really clear distribution, and it almost looks like we made it up, but we didn't, right? Because it's such a clear differentiation. On the light blue you see here, those are the companies that focus on business growth, business outcomes as the key success measure, how you measure the success of the HR function. Whereas the orange one means like engagement and retention of people. The green one is Net Promoter Score and those kind of measures of how satisfied people are with HR's services. And the dark blue one is basically efficiency cost-saving measures. And as we would have expected, a lot of the level 1 companies that are those that are cost center kind of companies are focused on efficiency or maybe Net Promoter Score of basically employees and managers with the services that HR provides. Versus the level 4 companies, you see the huge jump of this light blue area where they are all focusing about the success of the HR function as the success of the business itself. When I interviewed one of the CHROs of a very large healthcare system here in New York, actually, he said to me, I can't just measure the success of our function by engagement and retention of people. The only way I know we are successful is the business succeed if we deliver great care to all of our patients and are still financially viable. And that's the only way we can measure our success. So how you measure your success really drives how you organize around it as well. So knowing what you're accountable for and who drives these business success measures is really, really important. The other thing that I want you to say about the operating model, and we talked a little bit about that too, operating model in the different levels kind of, we can visualize this here. And the level 1 companies that do the transactional compliance, you see all of these disconnected dots, right? You see all of these people that are doing their own thing. Nobody really knows what anybody is accountable for. You have lots of duplication, not a lot of connection at all, so we didn't draw any connections between them. Very fragmented operating model. And then you go to level 2, where you bring it all together and bundle a lot of things and create the COEs and create the shared services and create like the business partners. So you see a lot more basically moving towards the center, a lot more centralized and organized and role clarity, which is great, right? But not a lot of flexibility, not a lot of slack when you say, well, the problems are changing so fast, as Josh said too, right? The problem's changing all the time. When you're in these rigid kind of centers, how can you reorganize very, very quickly and align to the problems and to solve them? That's what kind of the level 3 companies already go to. So you see these dots move a little bit away from the center and also some connections. So you could say, for example, you might combine some COEs. You might create some connections between the different HR business partner teams. You might even create some product manager teams that, like there's a product manager for maybe the onboarding product, where somebody for the learning product, there's somebody for the performance management product, to look end-to-end for the success of these products and solutions. And then level 4 companies, we call them systemic and consultative because they really operate in a very, very easily connected way, connect all the different COEs, help people also align to business problems, bring these agile teams together to solve those business problems. And it's going quite well, although not quite as well as we might want to see. This shows you how important each of these columns, like we call them elements that Josh showed as well, how important they are to the outcomes, as well as how far along companies are. Well, first, when you look on the right, how far along companies are, how good they are, not very good, right? But the area where companies are best at is having consultative HR jobs. So jobs are changing and the roles are changing, but we haven't quite figured out how to build the structure around it, the operating model around it, the organization models around it, because 30% of companies are good at building consultative HR jobs, but only 15% are good at reorganizing the work itself, or having supporting technology as well, 14% or less. So only half of the companies that are good at it, at the consultative jobs, are actually good at also organizing around it. So lots of work to be done to think about the operating model and the organizational model in a different way. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about how you solve business problems. So we said HR is all about falling in love with the problem and solving the right business problems in your company. How do you do that? Well, the approach that we have come up with, and Josh talked about it before as well, we call this the 4R framework. And the 4R framework goes like this. When you have any business problem, for example, we studied the healthcare industry, and we identified they have a massive gap of nurses. Not surprisingly, I think probably everybody has heard about it, and we identified 1 in 3 nursing jobs actually in the US will be open if companies healthcare companies keep going as they've been going. And so if you try to solve that problem, that nursing gap or any skills gap, any talent gap that you have, with recruiting alone, I guarantee you won't get there, right? Because there's just not enough people. Josh talked about how we will have less people, how we have less just headcount to pull them from. Not even having the right skills, but having enough people won't get there. Of course, you're going to do recruiting, and you're going to do it well, and you're going to think about location strategies and predictive analytics on what jobs will be open and everything else, and skill-based recruiting. So you've got to do recruiting, but recruiting alone won't solve any of these problems. You also have to think about, of course, how you retain the people that you already have. How do you help them stay with your company longer? In the healthcare industry, we identified some of the healthcare. So basically, you've got to think about retaining people. You also have to think about reskilling people. That's the learning and development side, of course, as well. You've got to think about how do you reskill people for the jobs that you need to fill. And that could be in the healthcare industry, for example, they are even reskilling people that are not clinical into first-level nursing roles and having career pathways built in. And then also, maybe the biggest area would be the redesign of the jobs themselves. And we hear a lot about job redesign now with AI. How do you need less people to begin with? If you can't get enough people, how do you redesign the jobs? How do you think about bringing in technology and helping people basically to not focus on what they don't have to do, but focus on basically what we call top-of-license work, the work that they have uniquely skilled, that they're uniquely skilled to perform well. So that's the 4R model. I talked about the healthcare stuff, and thanks for telling me to speed up a little bit, Josh. This is how we think about, actually, when we studied we studied each of these buckets. Each of these are massive domains. We have learning and development, we have talent acquisition, we have pay and rewards and pay equity and leadership and on and on and on. Every single thing that you can think of in HR. When we studied all of these things over the last few years, we always do these maturity models. And the point here is to look at all of these together and say what we found out when we looked at all of these different maturity levels was level 4 companies are the systemic companies. These are in each of these disciplines. So the systemic learning approach is actually, we call this basically growth in the flow of work. It's not just doing training and learning and development really well, but helping people grow and have internal mobility and everything else. You see, every single domain basically has to be part of this systemic approach, bringing them together in this systemic way, not just optimizing for the function that you already have. Okay. And I know a lot of you are in recruiting, right? A lot of you are in talent acquisition or maybe in learning. When we looked at each of these disciplines as well, in this survey, we asked them questions about how do you work basically in talent acquisition, in rewards, in learning and development. And what we found out, we ranked these disciplines from most transactional to most systemic. What we found out was fascinating. The disciplines that are older and more kind of traditional, less systemic than the ones that are maybe newer, like employee experience, diversity and inclusion, talent management, org design, tend to be more systemic because they have to be, because they were developed actually in a way that they are systemic by nature, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example, you can't do without integrating with talent acquisition, with learning and development, with rewards for pay equity, all of those kind of things. So that was kind of interesting. And another insight I have for you, specifically on TA and learning and development, I broke them down even further to say, of each of these levels of HR maturity, how systemically are they operating? And you see actually that talent acquisition, even the level 4 HR companies that are really those sophisticated systemic HR companies, only a quarter of them operate in talent acquisition in a systemic way, where they work in talent acquisition with learning and development, with talent management, with rewards and DEI to actually solve business problems. And a similar scenario actually holds true for the learning and development function as well. So every function actually has to participate. Every function has to work together with other function. And what that means, of course, when you want to do that, you got to build these, what we call full stack HR capabilities as well. So you can't really participate and solve problems when you're in talent acquisition, for example, that also have a learning component, if you don't understand a little bit about learning as well, right? And when you're a learning person, you got to understand enough about talent acquisition to really understand, is this now an internal mobility challenge? How do I pull on the talent acquisition kind of themes, skill-based recruiting, for example, all of those kind of things. And that holds true for every single discipline in HR as well. Holds true for the HR business partners too, by the way. So the HR business partners really also have to be kind of these full stack HR business partners. And as we compared in our HR capability model, as we compared the HR business partner roles of the high-performing, high-growth companies with everybody else, we saw that the high-growth companies have different capabilities that they're strong in. And this is from our HR capability work, where we saw that the most differentiating capabilities for HR people are working with leaders, developing leaders and managers, org design, change in communication, those kind of more strategic, forward-looking capabilities. Building those in the HR business partner specifically is critical, because otherwise, how can they solve your operating model challenges if you have to move into another business area, if you have to reorganize the organization altogether? Building those capabilities, most of the the rest of the companies that are not high performing are stronger at more legal compliance, even creating onboarding programs or something like that with the HR business partners where they can't really add the highest value. So really thinking about how do you build these HR capabilities and build them well. This is from our study with LinkedIn as well, where we said for each of these 4R models, what are the common skills that they have? And the good news is there is actually a lot of skills overlap already and capability overlap already, as you see in the middle here. So skills like recruiting, a lot of recruiting skills, but then also talent management skills, learning and development skills. The functions, the disciplines, the COEs are getting closer and closer together from a capability perspective as well. This is also, I wanted to show you this, so I'm glad we're getting to this as well. This is also based on all of these data points that LinkedIn has from their data set, and it might look a little bit confusing, so let me explain how this works. This is, each of the dots are roles, and these are, in a nutshell, not all of these 250 roles, but this is combine some of these roles. And the way that are clustered, they're clustered statistically, basically, with the underlying skill set. So we identified, and LinkedIn identified, there's 6 clusters that emerge here, and you see what the clusters are: that talent management and learning and DEI and talent acquisition, of course, and HR business partners, total rewards, and payroll. And you see that most of these kind of planets or, countries there overlap with each other, which means the skills are already getting closer together. You also see, though, that talent acquisition is a little bit out there, right? So that's a little bit of a problem, that talent acquisition is not one of the ones that are really overlapping. So lots of work to do as well to move talent acquisition specifically a little bit closer to having not just the deep specialized skills, because you still need them. You don't forget about the deep specialization, but you also need the, when you think about the T, you also need the crossbar, basically, of the T. So building these capabilities, let me just show you one more thing, and then maybe we'll wrap it up. Okay, so how does it look like? How does this look like from an operating and organizational perspective? We outlined, based on, and these are actual operating organizational structures of the top level organizations of level 1 companies, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Level 1 companies, they have lots of duplication. They have the VP of HR for each of the business units, and they might have some shared services, HR operations, HR technology up down there. Level 2, you actually get, the CHRO actually gets more direct reports, not less, because then you have all the COEs, right? You still probably have the HR business partners, senior HR business partners for each of the business units. You have a lot of the different COEs that you typically have, like 6 or 7 of them. And then you also have somebody ahead of HR shared services, HR tech, and HR operations. So the structure actually gets deeper and like more complex and more like functionally oriented in a way at level 2. And then when you move to level 3, there's a lot of consolidation that usually happens. So a lot of times then you have a head of all of the HR business partners that's on top of all of these VPs of heads of HR VPs. So you see this here in the yellow. Then you have a lot of times you have this consolidation going for the COEs. So you might have one global head of maybe the chief talent officer that has all the COEs. Maybe they don't have rewards a lot of times. Maybe rewards comes later. And then you have still the shared services kind of stuff. And then when you move to level 4, and this is actually an actual kind of org chart as well. All of these are actual org charts. We won't tell you who it is, but you might have more pooled services. Then you have actually a lot flatter structure if you look at how many direct reports the CHRO has at this time, because you might have all of the COEs kind of combined and people being cross-trained and cross-skilled and more pooled. The same with the HR strategy and HR business partners, people being cross-trained, cross-skilled on that. And then probably also some consolidation going on in the shared services where you have the HR operations also working with the HR technology and with the other shared services function to design and implement this.
So, thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
You guys, so I was just telling you that basically this is a workshop. We just did it in an hour and a quarter. But we're going to be publishing a lot more on this. There's just an amazing amount of actionable stuff here. We want to help every one of you in any way we can. We're going to be working through LinkedIn. We're going to do a lot of things on our own. So stay tuned. And if you want to take advantage of some of this IP immediately, our academy is available right now. You can join our academy. You can learn all sorts of stuff like this. And we want to thank you for your attention. And we'll be here. Kathy and I will just hang around for a half an hour during the break if anybody would like to come ask us questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.